Man, it has been a while. I know we've got people here. So today, I think, Katie, we're going to talk about, I think the title is Law and Success. And those two things actually go together when you talk about success and whatever you do in your personal life and also in your business life. The law sometimes gets tangled up in it. So when my daughter and I do the live things, and I guess we've got a lot of people showing up here, so we're going to talk about law. If you've got a question about anything law related, but particularly how that ties into success, maybe you're starting a business, maybe you have some kind of family dispute, maybe you are trying to write a grant. All of those things revolve around the law and what you need to do to become successful, particularly when it comes to starting a business. And so I want to try to focus on that today, starting a business, the kind of things you need to do to become successful in starting a business. And also, maybe we might hit a little bit on personal success, which really doesn't have a lot to do with the law, although maybe a little bit. So if you hang around, maybe we'll kind of talk about what that means. If Katie can remind me to talk about personal success when it comes to the law.
Okay, we get some questions rolling in. Do you want to get started?
Let's get to them, man. Let's not keep them waiting.
Let's not keep them waiting. Okay, Chris was the first one to submit a question. He said, why a living trust over a will? Would you pick that?
A living, yeah, I would probably do. I like a will. Okay, a will, because you can do a whole lot of things in a will that you can do in a living trust. A living trust is really just a way to hold your assets. If you're not really worried about, a living trust just keeps your assets uh, without you actually having access to them. They're yours, but you have them set aside. They still work for you. You know, a lot of money and stuff like that go into a living trust. But a will, I prefer a will. Most people don't have enough money or enough assets to put in a living trust. A will, you can do a lot of the same things. You can, in fact, you can, if you're worried about the government, you can take your home even, and you can do something like a life estate. You can deed your house, or maybe you've got a condo. You can deed it to one of your kids and set back what we call a life estate. That means you get to enjoy it for the remainder of your life. And when you die, it automatically passes to the individual you want it to. Credit card, insurance policies, paid on death. They're called a POD, a paid on death. You can designate who you want to have that asset the moment you die. That's to me better than a living trust. All of those things pass outside of probate. So the government really doesn't get their hands on those things. Although, the individual that you give those things to will be taxed, but the tax, you have to give a whole lot of money. And I'm not an accountant, but you have to give a whole lot of money. I think it's somewhere maybe around $500,000. Don't quote me on that. And if you're out there listening, you can look it up. But and it varies from state to state too. So you will have to pay taxes if you receive money through a will or any kind of an asset, an insurance policy. That's a taxable event. So you want to be mindful of that. But otherwise, I like a will over a living trust. It's way less complicated, and if you don't have a whole lot of money, then that's probably the way to go. Sometimes people try to get really creative when they do this kind of financial planning. And most of the time, it's not really necessary. You're going to spend a lot more money than what it's worth. I just go with an old-fashioned will. Put everything that you want people to have, put it in there, and make sure that you have someone to administer your estate, an executor. Make sure you trust them, because actually when you're dead, if you don't trust that person to do what you need to do, then there's really not a whole lot to stop them. So I like a will. What else we got?
So Chris says thank you because you answered his question. We have Connor. He said or asked C Corp or S Corp. I want to start a cybersecurity business.
Okay, and so I get that a lot too. So I like S corps. They're cheap. They're cleaner. They're simpler. Um, you again, I have seen so many people in business do all these crazy machinations and business structures and with a business, and at the end of the day, you don't get a real benefit. Now, what I would say is you start out, I would do the simplest thing, which would be an S corp. Then as you go on and you make more money, then of course that would necessitate a different kind of structure. I also like a limited liability corporation, an LLC, because an LLC will shield you if you're just starting out and you're a small entrepreneur. An LLC will shield you from a lot of the liabilities that you have when you start your company. Under this condition, when you start your LLC, you must keep all of your books separate, all of your money separate from your other personal finances. I have actually sued companies and had to do what they call piercing the corporate veil, because a lot of people think because they have an LLC, they're not liable for anything. But if that corporation is just a shell and you are using it for personal gain, like going to Kroger's or paying your own personal automobile or paying your house payment or paying a light bill, if there's a lot of crossover or any crossover in the expenses with your LLC, then you're probably run the risk of having that LLC get invaded, and then your personal liability is exposed. So I like an LLC or an S Corp. I like simple. When you're first starting out, simple is better. And keep all that stuff separate. Keep separate books, be meticulous, because if it's a business, then all those expenses that you have can be charged off and deducted from your income. So
Now we have Cruz. I don't know if this is a follow-up question on someone else, like a piggyback on someone else's question. You'll probably know what he's talking about. Of course, I don't know any legal terms. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. What about lanes or liens? Leins?
liens.
Liens.
Yeah. Well, a lien is something put on an asset. It's a court. It basically, if your company owes someone money, then they can go to court and seek to put a lien on any of your assets. Now, that's why you would have a limited liability company or an S corp, because those liens would not necessarily go on your own personal property. They would be held on the property of the corporation. So, liens can be placed on just about any asset, and because it's a debt. It just says that a creditor has placed a lien on a certain asset that you have, and whenever you sell that asset, then they stand in line to get whatever money is owed. That's really all a lien is. I personally don't get wrapped up about liens, although it is indicative of a debt. And if it's on a piece of property, it will cause you some trouble. A lot of times those things can kill your credit score. But if you have a bad debt, that's probably going to kill your credit score anyway. And a lien is only, if it's placed on your property, that individual that put that lien on there can only get that money out whenever you sell the property or there's some kind of transaction with that property. So liens are not good. That's a show of you owe some money, and you want to try to run your business to where you don't have liens. Or personally, you just want to prevent that if you can. And sometimes you can't. I will tell you, most of the time the government will place liens on your property for taxes. And I have had that happen to me. Sometimes if your business gets quite large, and there for a while, I made a whole lot of money. and you don't mind, if you don't mind the business very well and you trust people to do that stuff for you, it can get away from you, and then you're gone 2 years. You haven't paid your state income tax. You're not aware of it. And then all of a sudden, the government puts a lien on your property or even puts a lien on your bank account, which is even a bigger surprise. So you want to prevent all that stuff.
So Connor's been waiting patiently. I want to get to his
All right,
question.
Connor. Thanks. Go ahead.
Okay, it's kind of a two-part question. What is the difference between S Corp and C Corp? Can I register a company in another state with no taxes? Do I have to live in the state to register a business, or does it matter?
Okay, you give me 3 questions. So I will answer the last one first. These are all complicated. I would, to be honest, have to look up a lot of those. I know generally the differences in the C Corp and the S Corp. I honestly would have to brush up on that to give you a real good, solid answer. So you don't have to live in the state that you want it registered. Companies, corporations do it all the time. That's why Delaware, if you notice, Delaware, a lot of businesses have their corporate offices in Delaware because I believe there's a no tax. I think it's very friendly to business. So a lot of businesses are incorporated in Delaware. So you don't, to answer that question, you don't have to live in the state to where your corporation is. You don't have to. You know, just until about a year ago, I had a home corporation in Kentucky, and I registered that corporation in 2 other states because we were doing business in those states. So you don't have to be a resident anywhere. Like I said, Delaware is a big example of that. So I will tell you about conflicts of interest. Sometimes people, as an old counselor friend of mine said, ruminate on those conflicts. Sometimes people or litigants, people involved in the case, not lawyers, will think that there's more of a conflict than there is. They see the judges going out and having lunch with the lawyers. They see both sides of the lawyers getting together and having dinner or whatever, and they believe that to be a conflict. To be honest, most of the time people think there's a conflict. There's not really a conflict at all. And if you think there is, then you need to ask your attorney to ask that judge to recuse. If there's not a question, so I'll give you a funny story about conflicts. I was in a courtroom, and I'm assertive in the courtroom, and I'm loud, and I think just the way that I am, but it's also good marketing. If people out in the pew behind you hear you and they like what you've got to say, they might hire you. So I was being me one day, and I left. I was finished with the case, so I left, and these 2 ladies approached me. One was older, one was younger, and they said, I just saw you up there, and I would like to know if you would ask the judge to recuse. I said, why? They said, well, we think this judge there's a conflict, that they know the other side, that politics, and everybody always says that there's politics involved. And I knew the judge. In fact, I clerked under this judge. I said, he won't like it. She said, well, will you do it? I said, so my brain started calculating. How much money is it going to take for me to get this ass chewing that I know I'm going to get? I said, yeah. I said, $600. I figured it'd take me about 3 or 4 minutes. And $600 was about right to have this judge chew on me for several minutes. The mother pulled out 600 bills, and she said, now, go up there and do it. I said, okay. I took my client. I went up there and I said, Judge, I said, my client has advised me that she believes that there is undue political influence being placed upon you and that she'd like you to recuse. So I said it that way. And then I shut my mouth. because I knew the storm was coming. He reared back in that chair. He run his fingers through his hair, and then he lit into me. Now, he wasn't lighting into me. See, he was using me to get to my client, let my client know that there was no politics. He didn't play politics, and he was insulted at that notion. So he chewed on me for 2 or 3 minutes. Everybody in the courtroom heard it. And he said, Mr. Cisco, if your client would really like me to recuse, then she needs to give me concrete reasons by 4 o'clock today. You have her come into my office and draft a formal motion, and then I will entertain it. I said, okay, Your Honor. So I left. She said, well, thank you. I said, well, come into my office and let's wrap this thing up. She said, okay. She never showed up. I think she spent $600 just to do that. Recusing generally is not a good idea. Unless you honestly believe there's something there that judge is prejudiced against you, I don't advise it, because if they really want to get to you, they're going to get to you with the next judge that sits in that seat. They're going to say, hey, this is a case you need to be aware of. They asked me to recuse, because if I'm a judge sitting on that case, I'm going to ask my buddy, well, why'd you get out of this case? And then they're going to tell me. So unless you really, really think you need to, I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't do it.
Can you motion to a different date?
Yep. You can file a motion for a continuance. If you're getting jammed up and you feel like you don't have enough time, you can always ask the court and file a motion to continue the hearing. And most judges, if you've not ever done that before, most judges don't care to do 1 or even 2. And then they usually want a good reason. A lot of times, if you don't have a lawyer, I would simply say, I need more time to find a lawyer. That'll usually buy you a month or so. Again, I don't know their docket, but in some of the places I work, if you get a case continued, it probably won't show up, for at least a month. But again, I don't know your circumstances or what court you're talking about. So yeah, you can always file a motion to continue. Now, whether or not the judge will grant it, that's a different thing. But most of the time, judges or even the other side, I have never been opposed to a continuance unless my client didn't want it. Now, sometimes your client gets mad, but, and I would never do anything to make a client mad. I always ask my client, hey, they want to continue. What do you think about it? I've never been opposed to a continuance as a lawyer. I'm just not. I just think it helps you. You can always benefit from more time. So one of the things I talked about just right early, as far as personal success and dealing with the law, there's a whole lot of things when you're talking about business. There's a whole lot of things you can do in business that might be legal, but is it right? And that's always the question I pose to people. They'll say, can I do X? Or can I do this? And I'll say, legally, you probably can. I see it a lot with families. And it's usually in the worst situations when someone dies. Well, what can I do? Can I do this? Can I do that? And a lot of times there's nothing wrong. And I'll say, yeah, there's nothing legally wrong with what you're asking. But then I'll say, but does it feel right to you? I always throw that back at them, because if it's something that don't feel quite right to me, I'll ask that question. Does it feel right to you? I'm the lawyer. I'll do whatever a client wants to pay me to do. I don't get paid to feel good or bad about it. Now, as a lawyer, I would say there are things that I like. I like feeling good about what I do, but there are times when I don't really care. If someone's willing to pay the money to have me do something, like that lady paid me $600. I didn't really want to do it, but I'm not turning down a chunk of cash, for that. So we don't really get paid to feel good or bad or like or dislike the things we do. We just get paid to do things. So one of the fundamental things to me is There's a lot of stuff that's legal that you can do in business, a whole lot that's legal. But is it right? You know, you have a contract. Well, for example, if you're a landlord, you have a contract and someone's 10 days past their rent and it says iron right there in writing. You know, if they're past 10 days or whatever the day is, then you can evict them. Well, someone's 12, 13 days past. They got a little baby. You know, they just had a baby and they're a little late. They say, well, can I evict them? Because I've actually had those types of situations. And I'll say, yeah, you can, but why would you? I mean, why would you?
Do you have a
They're,
heart?
yeah, well, I mean, you know, I don't make that judgment either. It's odd to me. I wouldn't like it, but it ain't my money, right? It ain't my money. It ain't my property. And I think you do, it's whatever you think you can live with. You know, if you can lay down at night, hell, more power to you. I wouldn't do it. Because I've been in that situation. So you get that a lot. So I think the overarching principle to me is there's a lot of stuff you can do that's legal. You can, if you have a contract, you can, by golly, enforce that thing with an iron fist. And at the end of the day, you're probably well within your rights to do it. But is it the right thing to do? It's always a question I ask people. You know, whenever they want me to do something that looks a little heavy-handed, it might well be legal. But, there's a lot of repercussions when it comes to that kind of stuff. So there's a lot you can do. The law allows you to do a whole lot of stuff. But then again, I think you have to process it to see if it's the right thing for you to do, even though you have that contract. It might not be the right time to enforce that thing, So,
You wanted to talk about success.
yeah. All right. So I look at success when it comes to being successful. There are three things. I have a little roadmap, but there are three really big things when it comes to success. You have to plan. Success does not come by accident. Sometimes a truck falls out of the sky and gives you a whole pile of money. Doesn't happen very often. You don't win the lottery. Some people win it. If you're listening, you're probably not going to win it. So you have to plan. Planning for success is where it's at. Having a good, solid plan, having the skills to carry out that plan or the resources to carry out that plan. And then the other two things is persistence, and patience. You have to persist through the bad times. And most people, when they start a business or they have a plan, they're on fire in the beginning. And they have all these dreams and goals and all of that. And, I always say it's like a new Christian. They're on fire with the Holy Spirit. And everybody they meet is going to know that they're on fire. So if you had this great idea, it's the same thing. You are on fire with all this knowledge and all this idea. But unless you have a good, solid plan and have thought through it, and you are persistent, you have to get this plan, and then you have to work your plan. You have to work it whether you feel good or whether you feel bad. Particularly, I think you have to work it when you feel bad. And that goes with anything, any kind of success. I always tell this with my weight loss story. I'm right now about 142. I was at the doctor this morning, 142. 16 years ago, I weighed 247.
How tall are you? How tall are you?
About 5'9".
Okay.
When I stand up straight, about 5'9.5". So I was still fat. I was fat. I just had my kidney transplant. I was eating like a pig, about 6,000 calories a day, uh, and I felt bad. This all happened. I gained all that weight in about 8 months. And so I thought, how can I, I've got to lose this weight. So I developed a plan and I was at it every day. Every day was losing weight. I got a couple of apps I still use now. Under Armour makes a really good app, a fitness app. There's something called Live Strong. It's a calorie counter. I used it. But I was at it every day. I was persistent. I had a good plan. It involved exercise and diet. I worked it every day. I worked it on holidays. I worked it when I didn't feel good. Just every day. There were weeks when I would plateau and wasn't making any ground. I didn't feel like I was making any success. And those were the worst because you want to give up. But I was persistent. I followed through, and now I'm stable. I've been stable at this weight. I fluctuate 10 pounds or so this time of year, anywhere between 140 to 152, 153. I usually slide a little bit during the holidays, but then I get back on the wagon. I've been doing this so long now that I honestly don't know any other way. It drives my wife crazy when I go on vacation. It's hard for me to now relax and rest. It's like my running. I run every other day. Every other day. I've been running every other day for 15, 16 years. No matter if I feel good or not, I run. I run on holidays. I run when I'm on vacation. If I don't run, I'm in the gym, running on a treadmill that's what I did today, ran on an elliptical for about 6 miles. And it gets, the people around you get aggravated because if you're really focused, but if you want to be successful at anything, you have to be all in. There's just no other way to do it. My father used to call it half-ass. If you half-ass things, that's what you're going to get, a half-ass. And a half-ass ain't no good.
I think too many people, they aren't persistent and they give up really quickly because they're not seeing the success right away. Like they think it's automatically going to happen. And that's where the patience comes in that you talk about.
Yeah.
Too many people give up too quickly.
And one of the other things, so we looked at I always get these acronyms, P word. And so I covered these P words for success. A, action. Take action. Do something every day to advance. Take action to advance your plan. Every day. Don't take a break, not for one day. You got to do something every day. When I started doing this, I read everybody said you got to post every day. I have made at least one post every day for
well over a year.
Oh, well over a year. And well over a year. Now, I don't have a problem coming up with content. I honestly don't. I don't have writer's block. Well, I'm a writer, so I don't suffer from that. I can get content from anywhere because I have a lot of different things I do. I can write grants. I'm proficient at that. I can speak to people about a lawyer. I can speak to people about personal success, substance abuse and addiction. So I have a lot of different ways I can create content competently. So luckily I don't suffer from that. But you have to be actively engaged in your plan. And again, that's kind of sounds like persistence, but if you notice a lot of these things, there's just such a commonality in a lot of the themes that successful people do. And a lot of it is just staying after it. Have you a plan, be persistent, actively participate. Don't wait for that, job. If you're looking for a job, I get this all the time. Well, they're looking for a job. They've got a plan. They got a plan to find a job, but then they don't do anything to further the plan. It's like it's going to fall out of the sky.
I think a lot of people are afraid, whatever situation that they're in, they're afraid to kind of put themselves out there, get out of their comfort zone, and that often stops them from making getting any success or making any momentum. Like they're just afraid of it. You have to be proactive, as you said. or it's not going to happen.
You have to, and people are afraid, equally afraid, which is weird. A lot of people are equally afraid of success. I have a friend who is brilliant, but I always thought he was afraid of succeeding. And so therefore, he always put these roadblocks in his way to keep him from doing the things he wanted to do. And I honestly believe he was afraid. My brother is that way, just afraid of being successful. He's afraid of it. He's afraid of winning. Because if you're winning, then it's like these singers, you hear these artists talk about it all the time, writers, singers, performers. They get that big hit, and you know what's in their brain? You know, the next one. How am I going to top this? Right? And that's horrible. Like you had this huge success, and you look at these platforms. If we're looking at TikTok and whatever it is, YouTube, someone comes out and hits a lucky strike on a video, and they burn it up and they get 500,000 or 1,000,000 views, and they think, oh my God. And then they keep chasing that one. They keep chasing that. And they're not really chasing the thing they want that got them the 500,000. They're chasing that 500,000. And all that pressure of trying to be successful, some people can't handle it. So, but you've got to be actively engaged. You are not ever going to be successful sitting on your rear end. I don't care how good your plan is. You have to be actively engaged in that plan. That's all of it. That's what you got to do.
It's really simple when you think about it. The 3 points that you covered, really simple.
Yeah,
Just got
it's fun. And then competition. I use competition too. You have to want to compete. If you do not want to compete, you're not ever going to accomplish your goal. And then I think lastly, I always talk about spirituality. I think, and if we break it down in religion, I'm not a theologian, far from it. But I think if you are a spiritual person, your spirituality will give you a place to unload a lot of your problems and anxieties. It helps give you comfort. And it just gives you a place to turn your brain off and give over to something else. I'm a Catholic. I go to church, but I don't get a lot out of church. I get more out of thinking, meditating, believing in what we call it God, a higher power. I believe there's a lot of value in that. Just the thought that there's somebody else who can maybe has a better answer than you do, and if you sit and think about it long enough and meditate on it, maybe you'll look at something a little differently, and it gives you another perspective. I just think it's good for you. So those are kind of all my keys to any kind of success that you do. And all successful people have bits and pieces of every one of those things that we just hit. Every one of them. All right, Katie, thank you. I'm kind of dragging it. I don't feel good. So,
Go take a nap or something. You got to be ready for your 8 o'clock live.
all right. Thanks again. And I'm happy that you're back from your soiree.
I am too. Back to reality. Let's go.
All right. Thank you. We'll see
Okay,
you.
bye.
All right, guys.